This is Mainstreet with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Mainstreet. We're here on the C News Network every Tuesday at 2 p.m. I want to thank Michael and Grant Miller for the opportunity to be on this network. It's a wonderful, wonderful network. I also want to thank my executive producer, Mr. Rick Del Vecchio, for being part of all this. And my nephew is producing today, Julio. Yeah, what am I talking about? Julian. And without him, when the bells and whistles, none of this would actually keep on working forward. I also want to thank our community sponsors, the Japanese Gardens of Florida, South Florida, as well as the Elks Lodges of South Florida. How much longer the Elks will be with us, I have not a clue, but we'll keep you abreast of what's going on. One real quick note: next week, Mr. Ray Abruzzo will be joining us from The Sopranos, L.A. Law, Law and Order, Chicago PD. He's an old dear friend of mine, and he's doing me a big favor by coming on next week. I will explain next week what the big favor is, other than him coming on and why he's doing it. But Ray will be joining us. I hope you'll tune in then at 2 p.m. as Mr. Ray Abruzzo will be our guest. This afternoon, we have Mr. Kirk McKnight. Now, Kirk is a author of The Voices of Baseball, the game's greatest broadcasters. Let me make sure I get this right. The game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime. He has written this book. He's coming back in October on my birthday, the 25th, to talk about the new additions that have been made to this program, to this book, rather. He has interviewed nearly 50 broadcasters for this book as they talk about some of the great broadcasters of the past, which brought them into broadcasting and the broadcast game as it is today, as well as visiting many of the Major League Baseball ballparks, which we will talk about. We're going to have some fun this afternoon. So without further ado, would you please welcome Mr. Kirk McKnight? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's my pleasure to have you on. You were on a show with me a couple times before talking about this wonderful book. And of course, you have a new version of it coming out, or an addition to this in October. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, some of the interviews that you've had, the ballparks you visited. But before we get to that, something I discussed with you before we went on the air, and that is, I am so tired of hearing people say, baseball's too slow. It's 3 hours and something minutes. That's why I watch football. Football goes from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock or 4 o'clock to 7:30. It's still 3 hours and something minutes. And yes, it's what you said before the program. It's like a 10-second play and 40 seconds before the next play. But the only difference is that in between, they're talking about the previous play, what may be coming up, and baseball does the very same thing. Other countries, Latin American countries, countries in Asia, have embraced baseball, embraced it, love it. The College Little League World Series, the Little League World Series, extraordinary attendance. The College World Series games for the colleges, wonderful attendance by those schools. Baseball is America's pastime. It is, and at one time, our passion. And I don't understand all of this frolderall and these rule changes, which I don't like, and making a game faster. Faster for who? Sit back, relax, have a beer, have a hot dog, talk to your kids, talk to your friends, enjoy a ball game, and still worrying about how much time it takes.
Yeah, and any of those critics of baseball, if you watch a college football game, especially if you're watching on a network or something like that, or even a pro game, see how far those games have been stretched out because of TV timeouts and everything like that. It is kind of cliche to make fun of how long it takes, a 2-minute warning, and then they say, oh, so 20 minutes till the game's over. That's kind of true lately. All you see are sponsors, all you see are commercial breaks every 2 seconds. Getting through last night's Monday Night Football game, I tuned in to hear how Joe Buck would do, with his first time on the gig, and he did great, and so did Troy, but the game just takes so long to get done. It's just so crazy. So anybody that wants to sit there and say that, about baseball, why don't you take a look at football? Because like we were saying, it's like 10 seconds of a play wrapped around 40 seconds, wrapped around commercials every 5 minutes. Baseball, you have your breaks when there's a pitching change or when the top of the inning goes to the bottom inning and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible how people cannot relax, sit back and enjoy a ball game. Now, I know there are fanatics in baseball and football and everything, and there's the, what is it? The leagues in football now, they have the fantasy leagues, and there may
The
very well be in
UFL,
baseball. Yeah, which I don't go for that. Look,
XFL.
I'm a Philadelphia Phillies baseball fan. I know what misery is up close and in person. I definitely know that. I don't care about their batting averages. When I'm watching a baseball game or a basketball game or any sport, I'm just watching to forget about what's going on the outside. So go to a game, watch a game, enjoy it for the game, and don't worry about the time. Like, where are you going? Are you in a hurry to get up from a football game and go out and shop?
Hmm.
I don't get it. I just honestly don't get it. And you were telling me that some of the broadcasters that we're going to probably talk about have said they can't wait for these new innovations. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? You're making more money. Most broadcasters get paid anywhere between $200,000 a year and $2 million, if not more. Vin Scully was probably making what? At least $9, $10, $11 million a year calling Dodger games. God rest his soul. He was the best of the best.
Well, I think that when you talk with most of the ones that I've talked to for the Voice of Baseball are guys that have been around for a long time. They're not these new blood ones who are chomping at the bit to basically take anything. Some of these new guys don't have families, and they'll work the breakneck hours and do whatever, and they're just happy to be there. And not to say that the other broadcasters aren't, but the other broadcasters are used to things being a certain way, and that just gets disrupted, and their flow gets disrupted, and that really throws them off. Then you have things like COVID happening. That's a big part of the updated edition. As much as I hate to give any kind of leeway to something like that, but it did disrupt the game. And you see that these broadcasters have all these different things they have to go through. They have a curtain between themselves kind of thing. And their broadcast, the Padres no-hitter was the radio broadcast. That game took place in Arlington. Not even the radio broadcasters were on the road for that game. They had to sit there and broadcast that game from the visiting TV booth at Petco Park in San Diego. I mean, talk about disruption. There's just nonstop disruption. And I think that things just kind of stick out to them where just like, how much more are we going to pile on this before we just say, come on, it's time to retire?
Yeah. What was it that Bob Costas told you?
Well, no, he was saying about the speed of the game. There is an ebb and flow of baseball, and that you have to be on top of things. It's not predictable at any one moment. You could be seeing a home run hit on a pitch. In football, you kind of see where they're going with their drives. You got the 10 seconds plays surrounded by the 40 seconds of play clock and everything like that. And you kind of feel, okay, they're going for this. They're inching towards the goal zone or the end zone and vice versa on defense. So you do kind of have some predictability about it. Whereas at any minute, some, beanpole hitter who's never even seen a pitch before can hit a home run on his very first pitch he's seeing. So I think that's what kind of Bob was talking about a little bit in our interview, and just the sporadic nature of baseball.
Yeah, that's what attracts people to, to baseball, is the unknown. I mean, lately my Phillies have been winning, but it's been the bottom of the order that's been hitting, that's been keeping them in games, and the pitching. I mean, it's like a chess match in baseball, which is why I bring up my first thing. I hate the DH. I absolutely have never liked it in the American League. Now it's in the National League. Oh, by the way, I hope my good friend Joe Cassell is watching. He's a Major League Baseball fan, and some of my other friends who are broadcasters in South Florida. You're watching Mainstream, Kirk McKnight, the author of Voices of Baseball, as we talk about baseball stadiums and the broadcasters and the game itself. And you're watching Mainstream. Gary Allen with you, as I am, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Next week, Ray Abruzzo will be joining us from The Sopranos. I can't wait to have my buddy on. He's always fun. You never know what he's going to say, like baseball. But, I have never liked the DH. Never. It takes away from the spontaneity of the later innings, the chess match that goes on between the manager, the hitter, and the pitcher.
Yeah, I think the only time the DH should be allowed is for Shohei Ohtani. That's it.
Oh,
That's
man.
it. Because he puts in his time too. And just sticking to that point, I want to say, I kind of look at. I've been watching games, and this just in the last 2 months. I think it was the beginning or middle of July. You had 2 games in a row where Shohei Ohtani knocked in 8 runs one night, and then the next night went 8 innings of shutout ball, striking out 13. You are not going to see that again in your lifetime.
No.
You didn't even see that when Babe Ruth was playing.
No.
A two game back-to-back performance like that. And how many people, I want to know what the attendance was of those 2 games, because it was the Angels versus the Royals, 2 middling to bottom teams, but you may be seeing a performance for the history of baseball with very, very low 5-digit, if anything, probably, in attendance, and it's a shame,
Isn't he?
What?
Isn't he the MVP for this year? I mean, there can't be any other question of it that he's the MVP.
For the AL, I don't know. It's kind of hard to. It's going to be hard to beat Judge right now for AL MVP.
But here's the argument. Here's the argument that my good friend Michael Wilbon will make is Judge pitching as well.
No, right. And yeah, like if you look at Vlad Jr.'s numbers last year, and Ohtani edged him out for MVP. Vlad Jr. definitely should have walked away with that in any other circumstance. But Ohtani, yeah, from both sides, from the mound and from the plate, he put up great numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't know how his numbers compare with last year. It's just, I think it's a lot of hype around Judge and the home runs that he's hitting and the runs he's knocking in.
Yeah. By the way, if you want to make comments, folks, there is a comment section on the right-hand side of this page. You can comment, ask questions of us, and we'll be happy to answer those to you and for you. He's got to be the MVP. And here's the other thing too, Kirk. I think he's going to eventually end up being a New York Yankee, or he's going to be
I'm sure he is.
He's either going to be a Yankee or is it going to be a Dodger? They can afford a guy like him.
The fact that team's been able to hold on to Trout this long just baffles me.
Isn't it?
I just don't understand that team, and I haven't for a very long time.
Yeah, when I lived in LA, I loved going down to Anaheim. My wife and I would go down there. We'd see Dodger games. We'd go down and watch the Angels. And I loved it because Gene Autry owned the team at the time. And Gene Autry was one of my boyhood heroes, the cowboy. But yeah, how in the name of God does Mike Trout sign a new contract the way he does, staying on a team that is about as dysfunctional as anything on this planet, unless he just loves living in California and he doesn't want to go anywhere else. This man is a great ball player. Now, he's had some injuries as of late, this last few months or so, and he wasn't in the lineup a lot last year. But my God, how do you hold on to these 2 guys? Mm-hmm. The Yankees have got to be salivating, and so do the Dodgers, because I can't think of 2 other teams that can afford Shohei at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I see that as a matter of time kind of thing with Shohei, because I think the Angels gave up Syndergaard. That was a big deal for them to even get Syndergaard, and they didn't keep him that long. And Syndergaard's over in Philadelphia now to try to bolster them into the playoffs.
Yeah, well, we'll probably be a wild card. I mean, because we got off to such a slow start, and the Mets and the Atlanta Braves are just doing everything. And before we get into, by the way, I just want people to know, how do they find your book, Voices of Baseball, and how can they buy it?
It's available on Amazon. The pre-order is what's going to be out in October for the updated edition. The book itself will be available in April of 2023, but towards the end of October, you can start pre-ordering this new updated edition that's got 14 more broadcasters, a tribute to Vin Scully. Basically after the deadline, the day after the book went into the publisher, Vin Scully passed away. And so I reached out to the publisher and said, hey, things happen for a reason. And what if I were to get the broadcasters? Like, I don't want to capitalize on this or anything like that. But it was like I want to give some kind of homage to Vin from basically just anybody I could. And we got about 28 different broadcasters who gave their own testimonials and stories. And so that's included in the book. And we've kind of taken care of and taken out all the seance from the booth chapter from the previous editions where we talk about, Mel Allen and Red Barber and those guys. And it's more focused on Scully.
Yeah. Well, I don't need to worry about getting a pre-order from you. I'll get a book. I'll get a book from McKnight. I know he will. I know McKnight will make sure that I get a book, and that's a terrible plug, but I mean, I love it. But I mean, if I don't get one,
it'll be a few months anyway.
Yeah. You know what I love about Vin Scully when I lived in LA? Of course, I would listen to him on the radio, but it would be how he would tie the game, whatever's going on, into his commercial. So-and-so just hit a single right up the middle. And hey, if you want to be a hit at your next party, remember Farmer John. I mean, he would just slowly but beautifully go in there. And to think that he did it for how many years by himself. I mean, the man was a genius. And of course, he got started with Red Barber. And I never got a chance to meet the man. I never traveled in those circles when I was in LA. I was a young actor. But to listen to him broadcast, and by the way, my favorite broadcast team in baseball, and you know this because I've told you this before, is the San Francisco Giants, who have been voted by sports writers as the #1 broadcast team in all of baseball for I don't know how many years, 10 years, with John Miller and the guys at. Even if the Giants are not playing the Phillies or a game that I care about, if they're broadcasting a game on MLB. And it's their broadcasters that are announcing the game, I'm listening to it.
Yeah. I love
those
John.
guys are the best.
John's one of my favorite experiences from the Voices of Baseball for sure.
He
definitely is very, very involved in the San Francisco chapter, the Baltimore chapter. He broadcast for a good 13 years or so before he came over to San Francisco, and he was there for some of the greatest moments in the Orioles history, especially in that young ballpark. At the time when it was a young ballpark.
Yeah, that there was another great broadcaster in Baltimore, Chuck Thompson, who unfortunately went blind before he died. But he used to broadcast the Orioles and the Baltimore Colts at the time because my brother was with the Colts when he was doing all the broadcasting. And he always had a funny phrase. You know how broadcasters will say, waiting for the snap or waiting for the quarterback to take the snap. Unitas waiting for the takeaway. And, and there were other broadcasters in Baltimore too, but Chuck Thompson was really a special man, and God rest his soul. He's been gone for quite some time, but John Miller, man, that cat is as smooth. Oh man, I love him. And matter of fact, my business partner looks a little bit like John at a quick glance. I mean, he's just, my business partner, Rick Del Vecchio, is one of the funniest guys around, one of the nicest gentlemen around. And John Miller, I would love to interview John Miller, but I'm not going to go that way because I've already tried to hit you up for Bob Costas, and you said, I don't go that way, Gary, let's go that way. But what was John? I mean, was it easy to get John to talk to you?
I think some of these bigger ones, like I said to you in a private conversation, is that like they're obviously being insulated by their media relations representatives, but so sometimes to lock down interview somebody like John Miller or Vin Scully wasn't so easy. But John Miller, in this particular instance, it actually was a referral from another Hall of Famer, the radio broadcaster for the Rangers, Eric Nadel, who's a friend of John's. And so when I interviewed him my first day down there at spring training at the Rangers spring training ballpark, and he said, have you talked to John Miller? I said, I'm trying to. He's like, I'll see what I can do. And he got me he basically, it's like they do, they just kind of talk with themselves like, hey, there's a kid down here interviewing for a book on broadcasters. Would you be willing to speak with him? Sure, give him my number. And by Friday, there we were in a Scottsdale Sheridan hotel lobby. People walking by, not realizing that a Hall of Famer is just sitting there in the lobby, just in his, casual clothes,
Yeah.
Person, if they would have just opened their ears just a little bit and been like, I've recognized that guy from
Oh,
Sunday Night Baseball all my life. And so
yeah.
that's the beauty of things is, you never know what some kind of impromptu interview will be happening. And speaking of Eric Nadel, that's our interview took place during a game. He wasn't broadcasting a spring training game. And we were sitting behind this couple and they kept looking over their shoulders or kind of half looking over their shoulders. And I'm thinking, we're probably ruining these guys' baseball experience. Well, after Mr. Nadell walked off, they came up to me. They said, when does your book come out? They said, they were just watching the game. Like, we recognize Mr. Nadell's voice in our ears, and we really enjoyed that interview. When does the book come out?
Yeah. Oh, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the new edition too to come out because, you're the first one that you wrote was fantastic. I read it from cover to cover, and it was absolutely fantastic. Oh, come on. You've been a friend of this show's for a very long time. I tried to get a certain person to narrate something for you, but unfortunately, he's not returning my phone calls these days. So, I
think the publisher is going to have to take care of that one this time around. They have their own. That's the beautiful thing, though. The publisher, since the first edition came out, has actually bought out and kind of increased in stature in the publishing world. And I think they actually have their own audio department now, so it might be more available in audio, hopefully, when it comes out.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll do it. I mean, he loves baseball. And we're talking about Kevin Costner, who was a classmate of mine at the Groundlings in Los Angeles. But
if anything, the book, it'll be done in-house, and we'll be fine too, as long as people can have it and listen to it in their cars on their way to their jobs or traveling, doing their stadium tours themselves, I guess, too.
Speaking of which, a friend of mine wanted me to ask you, what got you to write the original book to begin with?
Well, I've been writing things, and I have friends in the publishing business. I was writing screenplays, back in the early part of the century, and I just kind of asked them. I said, "What do I need to do to pitch a book? I have an idea for a book because." I'd been to a bunch of ballparks as it was, and I thought, you know what, these ballparks are all different. They're not the same. It's not like any other sport. Everything's so uniform in all these other sports. They have the same dimensions. They have all these other things. But baseball, like you sit there and talk about, the green monster and how you can pop fly and make it over that monster, or you can hit a laser and it would just basically go halfway up the wall and be a single. Something that would be out of practically any ballpark because it's just a laser, but it doesn't get enough lift and it just smacks against that wall. But also anything that would be on the warning track in most parks goes over that green monster. It's just the science and the physics of the game. So I reach out to my publishing people. I said, what if I did a book on how these ballparks are different and how baseball's different, but had the broadcasters tell the story about it? And they're like, well, that's a great idea. I don't think I've ever heard of that. And I said, okay, well then let's try to do a ballpark tour of Major League Baseball and see how many broadcasters I can get to talk to. And, 50 broadcasters later, I've got representatives from every team, some 3 or 4 representatives or 3 from a few teams. And it's amazing what they can come up with. And then you go to the ballpark and you're like, okay, this is what they're talking about. Now I see, and you see how the ball plays and how the game plays. And if you're a gambler, a plug for you gamblers out there, if you sit there and see a game in April and you see that 2 aces are pitching right there, that cold weather is going to be in their favor, and you could probably pick the under on a lot of those games. Whereas 3 months later, those same 2 pitchers going in the middle of the humidity and 80 degrees and 70% humidity, you could maybe go for the over.
Yeah, because when it gets hot, that ball takes off. I mean, and it happens every year. Did you get a chance to talk to Kevin McCarthy with the Phillies?
No, it's Tom. Oh, I talked with Tom McCarthy from the Phillies. Is that
Tom McCarthy? Yeah. Tom.
Yeah. Tom was the first, from the and then I talked with Jim Jackson for the updated edition to add a few things.
Yeah.
Because Jim was good. Jim actually helped me with my Voices of Hockey book because he's the lead voice of the Flyers. He's no longer one of the voices of the Phillies, but he was, when Halladay pitched the no-hitter in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And a couple of things like that. So, but McCarthy was great. told me about a few things. Talked about CBP. Sounds like a pretty awesome ballpark.
Yeah, yeah. You know who you should try to get a hold of, or I don't know if you tried or not, but it's John Crook, who does the Philly
Oh,
broadcasting.
does he?
And there's 1,000 stories going on there. If you ever watch
Sure.
a Phillies, listen to or you watch a Phillies game and they're doing the broadcasting, John has got an interesting insight into the game that most people never even look at.
Right.
I mean, that's the other part about it too. I don't know how you felt, but I love John Miller, and there's no doubt about it. There's another gentleman who I adore as a broadcaster. He was in Miami for many years. His name was John Shambi, Boog Shambi, who is really a great broadcaster. But where are the characters? The
Yeah.
Red Barbers, the Harry Careys, the Harry Callis with the Phillies. Where are the characters anymore in broadcasting that drew the people in? I mean, when you listened in Chicago, and I lived there for a number of years, and you listened to Harry do a game, it was fabulous because by the 7th inning, he was usually snowed.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry, no secret, Harry would sometimes broadcast and you'd hear him chomping on a hot dog, or, he'd have a beer. God bless him. He was wonderful. In your book, I can't remember, do you tell the story of how he got from the Cardinals to Chicago to begin with?
I didn't tell a story. Some people have told me off the record stories just recently.
Oh. Well, I'm not going to give anything out that hasn't already been on TV.
And if I said that, his bones might crawl out of the grave and come wring my neck. So,
well, I mean, let's just face it. It had to do with he wanted a big raise. He was having extramarital affairs with a couple of people in the St. Louis area. Augie Bush didn't like it, got rid of him, mostly because one of the women was Augie's wife. But
okay, so that's common knowledge. Okay, those were the things that were brought to my attention that I did not
that's
know.
common knowledge. That's been even Bob Costas has talked about that.
Okay.
And then he got to Chicago, and he was doing White Sox games. And Jack Brickhouse was the big broadcaster in Chicago forever in the day. I can't remember because it was before my time, before I got to Chicago, if Jack had retired, and then Steve Stone, who you interviewed, could probably give you a better insight into that whole Megillah. But Harry was funny. Steve Stone was a great pitcher himself.
Mm-hmm.
He now does White Sox games, but he was a great pitcher himself with the Baltimore Orioles. And he's a good broadcaster. Talk about, first of all, what are your finishing up with Harry? Harry ended up with the Chicago Cubs as their broadcaster for years. His grandson Chip is, of course, with the Braves. They were supposed to broadcast together, and then Harry passed away. His real son was an Atlanta Braves broadcaster, so it kind of flowed within the family, sort of like Jack Buck and his son. When you traveled around, what were your 5 favorite ballparks that you were in? Forget the broadcasters, but the ballparks, because you talk about the ballparks a lot too.
The 5 favorite I've been to, I would say number one's it's now called Oracle Park. It was called AT&T Park when I went, but in San Francisco, that's number one.
Yeah.
You cannot find that anywhere. The way they have these other places, even though they're almost on the waterfront, they're not facing the ocean the way this is. And if you sit high enough up, you can just see the ocean. You can see the ships coming in, but you can still have a decent view of the game. So that would be number one. Number 2 is Truist Park in Atlanta.
Really?
While I did a cross country trip with my family. We went RVing. We sold our house in 2020, and we went RVing for about a year across the country and back. And I went to 7 ballparks on that trip. So I would say number 2 would be Truist Park in Atlanta. Number 3 is going to be a tie between Busch Stadium in St. Louis and Petco Park in San Diego.
I've been to Petco because I did shows when I lived in Las Vegas, and you and I both are former residents of Las Vegas,
right.
Which neither one of us will ever go back to. If you've ever been to Vegas, folks living there, you know why.
Right.
But I always hated. Go ahead.
No, what were you saying? You always hated what?
I always tell my friends, what's the difference between Las Vegas and Afghanistan? And they go, what? I say, one less rock.
Well, and so I've said, so San Francisco,
yeah,
Atlanta, St. Louis and San Diego, and then I mean, I can't forget Wrigley Field. I mean, that was one of the
Oh,
best baseball experiences ever. Just
oh yeah.
finding a parking spot a block from the, it was just the interesting finding a parking spot that was the actual length of my car. I'd probably Chicago bumped a motorcycle and a Jeep in the process, and the people who owned our apartment just said we could park there and gave me their sticker, and that's $100 spot right there.
Yeah.
Walked right into it. You're in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and everywhere around that ballpark, you're in that neighborhood feel, but you also are you got the L trains, you got the tracks, you got everything around there.
Yeah. I lived in Chicago for 10 years. Did some broadcasting as well as worked in the Attorney General's office, but the friendliest people, the nicest people in the world, just great folks. I mean, Chicago was great. I just can't stand the winners. That's all. I mean, they can have that, but listening to Harry broadcast and it was just a treat. I mean, and when you go to that ballpark, it's open. I mean, it is open. It is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the great all-American ballparks that you could ever go to and just sit back. And of course, then it was a lot cheaper than it is today, and have a beer, have a couple of hot dogs, and just relax and enjoy yourself.
Mm-hmm. And
the fans in Chicago, they're like the fans in Philadelphia. If you do something that screws up the game, they're going to boo you right out of that stadium, but they love their Cubs. They really love their Cubs. Did you get over to? Well, you got over to the Phillies. I know that. Which is
I haven't been to the Phillies yet. No, not yet.
Oh, you should. You need to get to that ballpark, man.
Most of those northeastern ones I haven't been to, except for Old Yankee Stadium. But I'm looking at the map behind me. I have my checked off map of baseball ballparks, but most of those newer ones I haven't been to. I'd say the Southeast is where I've been, Miami, and Miami's.
You didn't even let me know you were in Miami, because I just live up the road from there. So
I went down for an afternoon game. It was I was staying in Deltona for a month, around Deltona area for about a month, and
again, you're not letting me know.
Well, it was a Phillies Cubs game. No, Phillies Cubs. It was a Phillies Marlins game. It was a noon start, and my daughter and I jumped in the car, drove the 3.5 hours down there, caught the game at noon, and then drove back after it. And it was more of a checklist kind of thing. I mean, honestly, like, that ballpark is so gorgeous on the outside. That building is unbelievably just gorgeous on the outside, and then you go and it's just like going to another indoor ballpark, a warehouse. It's whatever.
It's a long story how that thing got to be where it is. We're talking
very
to Kirk
underwhelming ballpark.
Yeah, we're talking to Kirk McKnight right here on Mainstreet. He's my guest. He's the author of The Voices of Baseball, the broadcasters that made the game the great American pastime. He's going to be back with us on December 25th, my birthday. So I expect nothing. For my birthday, especially because I'm going to be 70. You're going to be 70 years old. My God, been around as long as the Queen was the Queen of England. But at any particular rate, Gary Allen with you here on Mainstreet, as I will be every Tuesday at 2. Next week, Ray Abruzzo from The Sopranos will be joining us. Hope you tune in then. Hope you tune in now. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, please go ahead and do so on the comment section of this particular broadcast. Some of the things that really caught my eye, I remember when I was reading the book before, was when you did talk to these broadcasters about the men that opened their eyes and they listened to as young men and then kind of brought them into the game. Costas, I know, loved and that's a great story, which we'll save for the next time, how you got him. But Costas talks about the broadcasters that brought him into the game. John Miller, I know, does. Chuck Thompson did. I mean, talk about what these gentlemen mentioned when they talked about Vin Scully, Red Barber, Harry Carey, etc. The broadcasters that made the game what it is today.
I mean, an interesting story. When I met with Dick Enberg before he passed away, I met with him in 2016, and he's in the paperback edition of the book. He wasn't in the original.
Oh my!
Yeah. Oh my!
Yeah.
And obviously, everything that he's accounted is in the will be in the updated edition. But he did mention that he did mention Red Barber, because Red Barber was he was the tutor. He was he was the mentor of Vin Scully, and obviously you see the byproduct of his tutelage with
Yeah.
Vin Scully, and there's nothing to take away from either one of them. But Red Barber had a way of, and that's the thing that Dick Enberg said, was that his pause, and here comes the winning run, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. It, he had a way to make it his own, and these are, they create their own persona, on the broadcast, and some people take from it. So, and that was another thing. Like, let's now shifting over to Vin Scully. Only Vin Scully can do the things Vin Scully did.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many stories about Vin Scully and how, broadcasters are told, if there's outs, don't start a story. It's suicide to start a story if there's outs on the board. But
Yeah.
Vin Scully would be able to articulate and be able to make it, to blend it in and bring it all back in before that third out is recorded. And also, this is a funny story, is that Vin Scully had that ability, especially when everybody's listening to him in the game. They're watching the game, but they have their transistor radio stuck to their ear. And when you have a place like the Los Angeles Coliseum of 100,000 people, or a Dodger Stadium sold out with 55,000 people,
Yeah.
you're going to get that feedback, and it's going to be disruptive, and it can even disrupt the players. And I think it's Jerry. I don't know how you pronounce it. If it's Jerry Roos, it's Reuss, but he was a pitcher for the Dodgers, and
Jerry Rouse.
Jerry Rouse. He would kick around on the mound just a little bit because he knew that Vin was trying to finish his story. So he would kind of kick around on the mound, kick the rubber a little bit, take his time, because he wanted Vin to be able to finish a story, and then he'd get back to work.
Vince was incredible. I mean, people would literally go to Dodger Stadium, which, by the way, I like Dodger Stadium. Love the Dodger dogs, best hot dogs around. We're going to talk about the favorite food that you had while you were going around. But Vince had a way of doing things that was unique. And, that was the great part about these broadcasters. When you read the book, and of course, I'm old enough to remember a lot of them, unlike today's guys where they try to be smooth and cool, like Davey O'Brien. I mean, he tries to be smooth and cool. He doesn't do anything to offend anybody. These guys would tell it the way it is. And they didn't steal anything from each other. They had their own unique style, which made them what they were to their fans in their hometowns fabulous. We had a gentleman down in Miami named Sonny Hirsch, the late Sonny Hirsch. I adored Sonny Hirsch. I never got a chance to meet him, but he did the University of Miami baseball. He did the University of Miami football. He did. We had a semi-pro baseball team here for a while at Bobby Maduro Stadium, which is long gone. Sonny was unique. And that's what made the local guys great. They were unique, and they did something fabulous. Even in football, they were unique. There, it's all gone now. Everything is like the corporate style, the cool guy. Just do it, and don't get out of line here. Don't get out of your lane. And that's what baseball needs. Get out of your lane. Say it the way it is.
Yeah. And you were talking earlier about characters, and I think we still have not as many. Hawk Harrelson retired, but he was one of those characters. He was notorious and infamous for his Homerism.
Oh yeah,
his Homerism, his Homer attitude, and I loved every minute of talking with Hawk Harrelson, and everything that he wrote, or everything that he said is practically in, if not the original edition or paperback edition. But John Sterling is still one of those characters. John Sterling is definitely one of the characters still remaining in baseball. If you're listening on the radio, some people have their they have their own reservations about the way John Sterling calls the game, but you can't argue that it's entertaining. It is entertaining.
Oh, it is. And the funny thing is, people like Vin Scully, Red Barber, even Costas, and others that have followed in their footsteps. If you are a student of the game and you love the game, there are moments like when Gibson hit the home run to win the game for the Dodgers, and he was limping around. He could barely walk. Vince, shut up. He just let the moment come to you. Nowadays, these broadcasters feel like they got to talk about everything incessantly, and it's just horrible. We're talking to Kirk McKnight here on Main Street. He's the author of Voices of Baseball and the Broadcasters That Made It, one of America's great pastimes. Julian, my nephew, do you have the picture up there of the book cover? So I want to show everybody what they're looking for. I hope he has it up there because I want Julian, when you get it up, put it up there. There it is. The Voices of Baseball and the game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime. That is John Miller on the left, and that is Vin Scully on the right, two of the great gems. I get choked up because I never got to meet Vin Scully. I'd love to meet John Miller. If a certain friend of mine for my birthday could arrange for me to talk to John Miller, now that would be a great birthday gift, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I keep hinting. And where can they find the book?
Find it on Amazon. You can find it anywhere online that books are sold, honestly. And just looking at the cover of this is the paperback edition's cover.
Right.
I think we're going to stick with the Vin Scully shot for the updated edition and have it overtake John Miller's. I'm sad to say I might actually call John and apologize for that. It was funny when I actually was in San Francisco. I went into the booth and gave John his copy, and John is a very humble person. He is not an assuming person. He is not a pretentious person. He is a kind, funny person.
Yeah.
And I handed him that book, and he just turned to his producers like, "Do you have your picture on the book?" Where's your picture on the book?
Yeah, where are you on the book?
And he didn't do it with any condescension. It was just laughter, and I just cracked up. And but the Scully's going to have to take the helm on the new edition. It's going to be a very strong tribute to him with that chapter being extended the way it is. It's going to be the longest chapter in the book easily. Even with the Ballparks of Yesterday chapter is taking a backseat to the Vin Scully chapter as far as length goes.
If you wanted to be a broadcaster and you grew up in my time frame, and you're a much younger man than I am, although living in Vegas will make you old quickly. But that's an inside thing, folks. You listen to people like Vin Scully, Red Barber, Harry Callis. These are the people that, if you wanted to get into broadcasting, you listened to them. You took everything. It was an education. You know, I interned for a while with Chuck Thompson with the Baltimore Colts when my brother was playing for the Colts. And I learned so much about the inside part of the game. You know, a lot of my friends who played in the NFL, and I learned through watching film and stuff how to dissect this game and watch what's going on. But boy, those broadcasters were great. Who was the best interview? And that's hard to say, I'm sure, because the additional interviews you had some great ones. But which ones were the ones where the guys opened up the most to you and gave you information you weren't necessarily even looking for?
I mean, they're some of the younger ones. I mean, I'm not ever going to go away from Vin Scully being my favorite interview and the best interview. The interview with Eric Nadel, another Hall of Famer, that was one of my other favorites. But you're in Florida, so I'll just come right out and say two my favorite interviews were both Dave Wills for Tampa Bay and Andy Freed for Tampa Bay. Andy Freed's an addition to the new book, and I'll tell you, the Tampa Bay chapter, no World Series on that team, 2 World Series appearances. There are plenty of stories from that Tampa Bay chapter. And when you see these chapters in this book, you'll see the broadcasters that were willing to really open up and really, give a lot. And Andy Freed and Dave Wills were a perfect example of that. And that's a tandem that you can tell they just love their job. Dave. No, go ahead.
Dave Van Horn, of course, with the Marlins,
right?
Who does the radio side of it. You can tell when people love the game that they're doing, or they love what they're doing, whether it's broadcasting or whatever the case may be. They love what they're doing. I love what I do. I mean, that you've been on with me so many times, McKnight, that it's incredible. By the way, I love the shirt. I really do. The stripes and everything really, really work well with you.
It's my daughter's favorite color is purple. But about Dave Van Horn is going into that interview, I was just basically looking to talk to him about the Miami Marlins and, coming to find out, okay, we got a Hall of Famer I'm talking to. Okay, that's great. Yeah. But then you learned that he was, for 28 years, was the voice of the Montreal Expos. And I'm like, oh, well, that opens up a whole nother door because he gave me and anybody who reads the book a firsthand account and a front row seat to the downward spiral that was the Montreal Expos eventually leaving Montreal and becoming the Washington Nationals. And it's such a sad story directly and almost completely. I mean, it's basically the seeds were planted for things that could be gone either way. It could have flourished. It could have, they were getting to get the wheels in motion, but that '94 strike just destroyed everything for baseball in Montreal. That's the unfortunate thing about it. Other teams were able to, the Yankees were really coming on in '94, and they got stopped short in their, in the heat, and they were on their way to winning the AL East more likely, and the Houston Astros that year were doing really well themselves. But Montreal, they were the talk of the town in '94,
right.
And that shut that completely down, and it was just a matter of time before they eventually moved.
I know we're going to get into this in October, but if I remember correctly, didn't Costas call the Field of Dreams game, the first one last year?
No, that was Buck and Joe Buck and John Smoltz. Because Costas usually does NBC. John Smoltz and Joe Buck called it for Fox on the broadcast, and the radio broadcast. I'm not sure if John Sterling and Susan came over for the Yankees for W Fan Radio, but I did get an account from Len Casper and his broadcast partner for the White Sox in their portion of the Field of Dreams game. And that's actually a part of the White Sox chapter now, is the Field of Dreams. Yeah. What a unique, if you want to talk about a unique game, you're talking about two professional teams driving in backwoods America through on a highway. It's not a major highway, if anybody in the area could have been like, they were sitting on their rooftops waving at the buses as they traveled from Dubuque, Minnesota to Dyersville. And that's an experience. And they're just driving through just fields and fields, and you have a whole new element. You have a baseball field, a makeshift baseball field right in the middle of corn. And now you have corn sweat, which is different than the humidity effect of the Midwest, which I was in Missouri at the time of that game and staying next to a cornfield and knew all about that kind of misery. But the corn sweat, that humidity, you really were feeling it even stronger than you would on a normal summer evening in the Midwest, which is to say something, because that's some of the worst weather ever. As far as playing conditions, when you have all that kind of humidity, it's uncomfortable. You add that corn sweat, it's a whole nother experience. In fact, dropping names, Pat Hughes, when he called me to give me his account for Vin Scully, he's the lead radio voice of the Cubs. I said, hey, be careful of the corn sweat next week, because it was the Reds and Cubs the following week that were doing this year's Field of Dreams game. So I felt I was able to give him the and I told him all about what Len Casper told me. And Len actually used to call games for the Cubs. So, of course, Pat knows who Len is. And I got finished telling him, he's like, oh, great.
You know what? But you know what? In spite of all of that, I remember Kevin saying because I asked him, did you ever think that this would turn into what it has turned into? He said, no. He said, I just thought it was another baseball movie, a wonderful baseball movie. And Ray Loletta, who I knew, played Shoeless Jackson, and none of them thought. Timothy Busfield didn't think it was going to turn into what it did, and it did. But that's the great intrigue and beauty about baseball. It draws people in that they're going out there and they're sweating their butt off, but God, they love it, every second of it. And that phrase from the movie, you want to have a catch? I mean, does that not sum it up in one form or another about how wonderful this game is? Baseball.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I don't know how much my daughter would appreciate Field of Dreams. I want to watch it with her sooner or later, but I watched it recently with my wife a few years ago, and I just thought, man, this is such a great movie, and we have our different baseball movies. That Moneyball is probably my favorite baseball movie.
Okay.
But when you talk about the lingo and the unspoken rules, Bull Durham is just the tops of the charts
Oh,
when it
yeah.
comes to baseball. Just the Kevin Costner sitting there yelling at the batter who he said, "You're going to get this one down the middle," and because Tim Robbins kept shaking him off in the 8th inning on the shutout, and he says, "Here." And he told the batter what he's going to do, and the batter hits the home run. He starts admiring it, just standing there. He's like, "What are you standing in the mailbox? You're looking down my pitcher. You showing up my pitcher?" And he starts screaming, but he's the one who gave him the gift pitch. I love that. I love that.
He loves baseball. Tom Selleck loves baseball.
Mhm.
I mean, I know there are people today who don't. Again, going back to what we talked about at the top of the hour, which was the slowness of the game. I love the game. I'm sorry. If it's just feeling right, I'm going to watch the game. I don't care who's playing. I mean, I go back to when I used to go to spring training games, and I got Roger Maris's autograph, Mickey Mantle's autograph, Tommy Tresh, Bill Richardson's autograph. I remember getting the Phillies, Richie Allen's autograph, or Rich Allen. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and I didn't care about, and I don't care about stats and who hit a home run here or there. I'm just watching the game to get away from whatever else is going on in the world. Baseball is a great American game, and I'm so tired of people saying, we got to change this, which brings us, we got about 10 minutes to go, maybe a little bit more. The changes that are happening. First of all, I told you I don't like the DH. Now they're going to make the base pads a little bit bigger, a couple inches here, a couple inches there. Pitcher cannot throw to first base more than twice. Third time, it's a balk. They are, thank God, taking away the shift. Thank God. They're taking away the shift, because that was taking away a lot of hits from people. But I have a feeling that the hits are going to, I don't know. How do you feel about some of this, and how do the broadcasters feel? We talked briefly about it at the top of the show, but how are the broadcasters really feel about? And on the 10th inning, if it's a tied game, the guy at second no longer is going to be there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the broadcasters with the shift. I mean, let's look at the dynamic of baseball. Let's look at one of the key players and key hitters of this millennium, of this century, in Ichiro Suzuki. Who knows what Ichiro's career would have looked like with the shift? I mean, I really ask anybody honestly, who knows what that would look like? And I can tell you, it would be a completely different Ichiro Suzuki.
Yeah.
You have the broadcasters talking about how we have a lot of walks and a lot of strikeouts and a lot of home runs. So batting averages are totally suffering. We're not seeing the small ball. We're not seeing the space stealing the way we used to. We're not seeing, we do see the first to third, obviously, on a single and everything like that, the hit run. But when you think about it, there's just so much of the game that is lost on the shift. So I'm excited for the shift to go away, because I'm sick of seeing 234 batting averages across the board. We have a different idea of what's a good batting average. I have a fantasy baseball team, and I was talking to my dad, and he says, "Well, they're batting 245," and I said, "Yeah, and so is everybody else."
Yeah.
You do have some. You still have some 300 hitters. But you don't have it as much. You don't have as much because you have these. It's like and then we're talking about Aaron Judge. We got Aaron Judge, who hits a ton of home runs, but he also strikes out a ton. So we can move on to the other things. But the shift, like I said, just imagine Ichiro Suzuki playing in the middle of the shift for most of his career, and it would be a completely different career.
Or Pete Rose. Or Pete Rose.
Pete Rose, or any of the other hitters. I'm just trying to think of the more recent hitters. Somebody who got 260 hits one year. However many it was, I forgot what it was, but
yeah. Hey, and speaking of which, how about Pujols, man, this year? Is that not amazing?
Yeah, I was very grateful to watch Pujols last year at Houston. I've seen him plenty when he played for the Angels, but I saw him as a visiting Angel play in Houston, and he got the only run that the Angels got that game, and it was a contested home run. He hit the pole, but it was contested, and it was a meaningless home run. But I looked down to that dugout after they did the official and calling it, and I just saw him just kind of doing this sarcastic run up and down the dugout, like they did with the little with the rookies and the first and second year guys. And I thought, you know what? Look at Pujols. He's still having fun. Meaningless home run, but it's still a home run, and it's a contested one. And he could hear the boos in the crowd and the Houston faithful just going nuts, and he just having the time of his life. And,
Oh yeah.
And St. Louis. By the time I caught St. Louis, real quick, he had been traded to the Dodgers. The Dodgers picked him up from the Angels. If maybe the Angels might have cut him, and the Dodgers picked him up. I'm not sure how that all transpired. The Dodgers were up comfortably late in the game. Scherzer pitched a gem, 8 innings or however many he went. And there was a spot for there to be a pinch hitter. And we're in St. Louis, and the St. Louis faithful are screaming, Pujols, we want Pujols, Pujols. And I was thinking, how great would it be for Pujols to come out and just have a pinch hit appearance, not realizing that he was going to play this whole year and have the year he's having this year.
I mean, my guy was favored to win the home run derby in the All-Star break, but he faded, and Pujols won it, and I just couldn't have been any happier for anybody to win it. It's great. I don't think he's going to be back next year. Of course, he might. It depends on if he gets. He's only 2 or 3 home runs now away from 7. Mm-hmm. He needs 3. And speaking, you were talking earlier about Judge. Can the Yankees afford to keep him around?
They will try to keep him around. They can afford to do whatever they want. The question is what they'll do. And I think, if anything, they better keep him around if they want their fans to, I'm a Yankee fan. I'll admit I'm a fan of all the teams, but I'm more of a Yankee fan along all these years.
Yeah.
And as a Yankee fan, I just have shook my head at the decisions that Cashman has made and everything like that. Or I guess that Cashman has not made and has not gone for pitching. When Joe Torre won 4 out of 5 World Series, it was on the backs of veteran pitchers, and it was the backs of small ball hitting, not on home runs. And
but the small ball has been gone. I mean, it's all home runs. It's all the glory goes to the home runs. It's like a 60-yard touchdown pass. It's no longer pound and ground.
But that's not going to win the playoffs. You can have Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Soto, Pujols, Trout, all that. But if you've got somebody like Verlander shutting the other team, shutting on the other side of the coming at you from the mound, you're not going to win those games.
We've got about 3 minutes left to go. A couple minutes longer we can go over. You go to the ballpark. You're there with your daughter, your wife, or friends. You go to the hot dog stand or the concession stand. What do you buy, and what is your favorite thing in a couple of different stadiums, my friend? Well, and remember, we come from a city where food is plentiful.
I didn't really indulge too much when I was down there in Miami, but I will say in Atlanta, they had these Parmesan garlic fries, and they had these powdered sugar fries. They were basically like funnel cake. They were funnel cake fries is what they were. That was it. Atlanta. Those were my 2 favorite. Going up to Milwaukee, though, the Bracho helmet nachos. So bratwurst nachos in a giant helmet. Split that with my nephew. My nephew came in from Vegas to Kansas City, and we went to we did the 3 parks. We did St. Louis, Milwaukee, and the Cubs. Royals, unfortunately, were out of town that weekend, so we did 3. Yeah. But the Bracho helmet in Milwaukee, that's got to be up there. Had a pretty good cheesesteak at Great American Ballpark, but I would say the 2 things that stand out for me as down there in Atlanta, those funnel cake fries and that Bracho helmet up in Milwaukee.
Well, when you get over to Philadelphia, you gotta go. Bobby Rydell, who was, God rest his soul, a dear friend of mine, we always argued about which were the best cheesecakes. But if you do go to Philadelphia, you've got to get a cheesesteak sandwich. Philadelphia, that's what they're known for, cheesecake. So not cheesecake, but
cheesesteak.
Cheesesteak. I just bought a cheese. Anyway, I bought a cheese cake today. I'm gonna devour that. But at any particular rate, Julian, put that picture back up again of the book, please, one last time. There you go. And tell people where they can get it.
You can get it anywhere online books are sold. Especially Amazon or Barnes & Noble. But if you're wanting the new stuff we're talking about, wait another month, and the pre-orders should be available towards the end of October. You should be able to pre-order the Voices of Baseball. It probably will be a different looking cover than this, but it'll definitely be worth your wait if you wait a good month and a half until that pre-order, and then you get the book in about the middle of April of 2023.
That's going to be great. And of course, we're going to have you back in October to talk about that, as well as everything else. This hour has gone by very quickly, and I want to thank you, Kirk McKnight, my dear friend from now living in Arizona, but from Las Vegas. And I just want everybody to get the book, The Voices of Baseball. Whether you wait for the new one to come out or whether you want to get the older one to come out, please. And Kirk, thank you so very much. You stay right there. I'll talk to you right after the program is over with. But I want to thank all of you out there so much for joining us here on Main Street. Every Tuesday, we're on at 2 p.m. Next week, we have Mr. Ray Abruzzo as my guest, and it should be a whole lot of fun. Until next week, would you do me a favor? Take care of yourselves and each other.